Hello, and welcome to an adventure like no other. Far more than what you have known, there is something far more to be known than you can ever know. And it is all about you, the real you, your real awareness with your intuitive senses. You were never taught that the real you, your real awareness, is operating 5 bodies in cause and effect, restricting creation. You have been taught to think that you are only a one-dimensional human person, with a mind and emotions, and with a very short lifespan on this planet Earth. More than what your mind can grasp is your intuitive senses that can be opened to see beyond all your restrictions. You have always had an opening to see beyond what you have known, and this has been purposely kept from you, and this is where you have heard rumors and stories about your nightly dreams. Your so-called dreams is your opening to your intuitive senses that will allow you, the personal you, to excel beyond what you have previously known. Everyone has intuitive senses, and very few people take advantage of what is possible by recognizing something more than their mind can understand. Creation has its place for all of us, and then there is all life, which is far more than anything than what can become with creation. Everything we experience is necessary for us to survive with whatever we choose and decide our life to be. New Kevin Smith is the great witness to something more than what can be taught and learned in any school. It can be so that when anyone first listens to Kevin's intuitive side experiences, also known as real side experiences, from what their personal mind has known, Kevin's manner of expression will at first be rather different to comprehend. This is where this introduction and reading the new books and Facebook groups will help. Have fun deciding. DUANE the Great Writer and Seer.
This real side experience would involve further dealings with vampires. For over the years, have I had my share of real side encounters and interactions with this particular body type. Experiences ranging from outright hostility to quite the opposite, where certain vampires are assisting me with assignments as their decided means of stepping up and electing to investigate beyond the restricting confines of their consciousness personal self and limiting creational positions, embracing intent with the all is recognition, etc. For indeed, only relatively recently had a vampire, very powerfully placed among his kind, assisted me with rounding up the most notorious vampires and displacing them, and in a turn was his awareness bolstered, and this was reflected in his very body type, as it became less distorted, the consciousness affecting him as distortion being released as per the awareness process, and as it transpired then, revealed to me over the years, would be a verification of the reality of the vampire, not only operating multi-dimensionally on the real side, but on the physical also, including then the earth, and generally in a dark force affiliated capacities. That as a consciousness construct dictates a body form design, expected can it be for any dark force orientated consciousness to make manifest body types of a decidedly twisted and distorted nature, the vampire just another example of this. Though it must be emphasized that regardless of how we have formulated the consciousness through our life choices and actions, animating through it will be real awareness, which all life is, where embraced is the singular imperative, that of real survival, the constant self-recognition of life's own endlessness, made possible through aspects of itself, real awareness units, recognizing it from the comparison that creation provides. With this acknowledged, so we establish the attitude of assisting all in creation, irrespective of their body forms or the manner by which they choose to conduct themselves. As in reality, we all are this same all aliveness, isness, everything, operating from a singular assisting life compulsion, aside from ideas formulated which present as barriers to certain body types, as the personal self delights in a categorization of likes and dislikes, etc. My dealings and interactions with these kind of body types, the various expressions of the darker forces, stems from my own past lifetime affiliations with them as I have shared, allowing a mechanism by which I can connect with the more notorious species and forms. For every experience, and in relation to others, requires the idea agreements that generates them. Every lifetime then, as the monsters we may have once been, and in relation to others of a like breed, will be retained as ideas in consciousness, as everything we experienced since entering the simulators will be stored as though data files of information that can at any moment be accessed, and where the beings and body types in association with such dubious past lifetimes can be engaged with. Just a case of locating the requisite idea file, and as though then booting up the game effected from it with all the characters involved. The vampires are much as they are depicted in the movies, though the vast majority are visually far from the way they are glamorized on our screens. Blood drinking seems to be a standard, though not all vampires will have the necessity, as there are indeed many versions and varieties of the vampire body type, but all have excessive lifespans and the ability of converting others to their kind. In this real side experience, I would be in the company of another individual, the identity of which wasn't made apparent to my personal self, though impressions revealed I was as though allowing him along for the ride, so to speak. We were encroaching on vampire territory, a position in creation that was considered one of their strongholds. Rather a clandestine operation, one where we preferably would enter, go about our business, and depart, absent of being detected, although nothing was revealed as to the nature of our objective. Our location was a rocky and barren landscape, and positioned at its centre was a vast structure, a fortress, which was the lair of the particular vampires residing there. As we neared the vampire stronghold, scattered across the terrain leading to its entrance, were an array of stone statues, many of which were in various states of deterioration, depicting all manner of gruesome and distorted body types. Many were rather demonic appearance-wise, others were either removed from my current array of experiential references that allowed identification, or were in such a state of decay as to be indeterminable. We continued on, the scene skipping to where we now were within the vampire's lair. Evidently we had encountered no resistance, or had been especially stealthy, as no vampire had been alerted to our presence, and we now were stationed in a chamber deep inside the bowels of the fortress. This chamber was where we seemingly needed to be, to undertake our operation, but one which could only be conducted at a certain time, and where necessary was it to wait and remain hidden until this optimum moment was upon us. There would be the constant sound of vampire activity and movement beyond the chamber we were stationed in, and inevitably one of the vampires would decide to enter our chamber. a chamber which presented no means by which concealment was possible, as it was devoid of anything to hide behind. It was in actuality an empty room, although essential for the conducting of our objective. The immediate incentive of the intruding vampire was to assail us, but instead of the necessity then of defending ourselves, I would speak with the vampire, and my words would placate him. Impressions provided information in regards to one of the vampire's current operations, those stationed in the fortress at any rate, that they had in their possession a very powerful being, appearance-wise presenting as a human female who had remarkable consciousness-developed capability. She was in the vampire's keeping by her own volition, for through her abilities no vampire could trespass against her or hope to retain her against her wishes. She was to be utilized as a vessel or tool by which the vampires could establish a more prominent placement in creation and be positioned that they could be far more adversely impacting than they had previously been. This powerful female, whomever she was, seemed to be the key by which such an ambition could be realized, but it was as though, powerful as the female was, required was an unlocking of her potentiality, as though a consciousness designed that could have unlimited capability, but she was self-restricted, as though locked out, or firewalled to an extent, from her own computer's full magnitude of resources, as an analogy. Impressions revealed that assisting the vampires with this situation, this unlocking of the female, was not only possible through real awareness, but that which they hoped to achieve would never come to pass. The female would ultimately reject the desires of the vampires and not be utilized as a mechanism to bolster their controlling positions in creation. And so, to assist the vampires was a means by which I could gain favour with them, get in their good books, so to speak, with them unrealizing of how the powerful female would deny them their wants. An opportunity to engage with the vampires, be on good terms with them, affording a means of perhaps bringing them potentially around to making better life choices, presenting them with the all-ears pertaining references and so forth, a plan with no drawbacks, as they would never be able to wield the female's power. And it was this offer that I would convey to the vampire who had entered the chamber, that would halt him in his antagonistically inclined tracks, and he would escort myself and my associate from the chamber to another location. In regards to our actual assignment involving the need to be stationed in the empty chamber, nothing was revealed. Perhaps it was in relation to the powerful female present in the fortress, but for now that avenue of activity was abandoned, as I now was extending aid to the vampires, and their objective, where unlocking the female's full potential was concerned. In a remote area external to the fortress, there seemed to be a very sophisticated technological array of machines, the property of the vampires, but that which had rather come into their possession as opposed to having been constructed by them. For this technology was a means by which the powerful female's abilities could be unlocked, but a technology the vampires had a seeming inadequacy to operate. The consciousness being a construct of ideas, so just like files on a computer, these ideas can be deleted, altered, rearranged, and effected then will be altogether different circumstances in regards to the individual's body type, creational positioning, and in this case, the unlocking or liberating of certain ideas that would allow the female her true potential. As I have shared on previous real-side experiences, many beings, especially those more aware, have the ability, where such a consciousness alteration is concerned, of themselves, and where agreement allows, others also, but additionally can such a consciousness restructuring be achieved through a technological means, as I also have been shown and been involved with. This machinery, by whatever hand had constructed it, and however it had come into the keeping of the vampires, was another example of such technology, and through a real awareness as a part of the everything is reality, permeating through all consciousness, so every idea of creation is available, affording the ability where the utilizing of any created technology, regardless of its source or complexity, is now possible. The technology was beyond my current lifetime human personal self to grasp, though seemed to involve the harnessing of the sun's energy, presumably a sun that was positioned in proximity to whatever area of creation the barren planet we were on was located. The technology would synchronize with the frequencies of the sun, and as though isolate a certain proportion of it, holding it at a certain threshold of energetic effect, which allowed then the powering of the machinery and applying it to where this consciousness unlocking of the human female could be achieved. As I mentioned, while in an assisting capacity, I would be in the favour of the vampires, where I had opportunity to perhaps bring them around to more beneficial life-supporting action, but this would only be a brief window. For when the female was unlocked, where she ultimately would deny the vampires, so this particular breed of vampires' previous inclinations to destroy me would be restored, and perhaps made more so, as they would undoubtedly be infuriated at having their schemes dashed. Indeed, the scene would skip, and I was being hounded by the vampires, suggesting the experience now at a point where I had completed my consciousness unlocking of the female. She had decided to not assist the vampires, my window of opportunity with the vampires now concluded. If indeed I was able to achieve anything wasn't made apparent, and now the vampires were directing their discontent upon me. For I would be operating initially in my place of a physical level work, and two vampires would march into the building and intending to be the delivery of my destruction. Rather than conflict with them physically, I would elevate myself from the ground and beyond their reach, but try as I might, I was unable to convince the vampires as to a different course of action other than my eradication. I would spend the rest of the experience being hunted across multi-dimensional creation by members of this particular species of a vampire that I had previously extended my assistance to in regards to the human female. My mechanism of defence was to retain myself at an altitude beyond their grasp wherever in creation I converged with them. But rather than be levitating or flying, I was utilising a kind of a mobile, self-powered contraption that comprised of a platform where I stood upon that had me elevated from the ground, with no means by which I could be reached. I was still adamant that I could get through to the vampires in some shape or form, and as I was pursued across the dimensions of creation, but beyond the vampires' ability to lay their hands on, due to my mechanized contraption vehicle, I would be constantly attempting to placate the vampires. the overall thrust of my argument being that of suggesting more awareness of beneficial alternatives to their decided life choices, which in turn would benefit them ultimately, but it seems, alas, they had little interest other than my destruction. I would transition from the real side and my relentless vampire pursuers to a position bridging the real side and the physical level, which presents my physical level bedroom as the overall scene, though affording the means by which other dimensional body forms can feature, as though the overlapping of two creational views. I have shared many years ago of my engaging with a particular variety of alien, the Greys, from this between-state position, where on certain occasions their intentions would be malign, and on others quite the opposite. Specifically, I once shared a between-state experience where one grey alien presented me with what appeared to be a curious seed pod, impressions revealing that no malice was involved, and I would accept this, though no details regarding the nature of this offering was ever made apparent. And now, in this current between-state experience, if it was the same grey alien or another couldn't be determined, but delivered by a grey would be another of these pods. It fell upon me to accept this pod or not, as had been the case years ago, but impressions now revealing that should I do so, this would facilitate a kind of intrinsic bond or connection with the grey alien bearing this pod, as though, if accepted, formulated would be a link with this particular grey alien, in a way that perhaps I lack the adequate references to express or describe, but the sense of it potentially being beneficial in a way that will be revealed at a later stage. I did have the impression that potentially the grey could use this link as a mechanism of control, despite his sincerity in that moment. For with all body forms, generally most are operating more from a personal self-serving perspective, and even if they are well-meaning, or even have an intent placed with the all-is, intent can change from one moment to the next, so there can be no assurances in situations where we open ourselves up to others. Nevertheless, with the sense of a beneficial potential promise, through my agreeing to such, I would accept this offering, and the pod would as though formulate in my room and be absorbed into my body. The grey withdrawing from the scene, as I would move my awareness fully onto the physical, where no other dimensional bleed-overs could now feature. And it remains to be seen what comes of this, and of my latest interaction with the vampires.